Hello everyone, afternoon, and welcome to this live workshop titled Creating Concepts for Games. There'll be a presentation, although I think it's a bit more interactive than a presentation, by Josh, Max and Jonathan. During the kind of session, if you do have any questions, there is a Q&A button at the bottom of your screen. So just pop anything into there, and at the end of the kind of presentation, I'll read out those questions to Josh, Max and Jonathan, and one or all of them will pitch in and answer as best as they can. So yeah, over to you, Josh.
Great, thank you very much. I'm going to pop up my my slides for a second, if that's okay. There we go. So welcome everyone. In fact, I've got a slide that says welcome. There we go. So welcome to our kind of live lecture for MDX Games Design. We've got a few things we'd like to kind of cover today, really. And that is partially to talk about like what our course is and a little bit about like what game design is as well, because one of the key themes that we'll touch upon is that game design means tons of different things. I mean, it even means a bunch of different things when you're looking at the game design courses at Middlesex University. And then we're going to do a little bit of a kind of discussion, bit of a kind of interactive session on how to develop game ideas and where game ideas come from. So just to introduce us all, my name's Josh. I am one of the lecturers on the game design course at Middlesex University. I teach on all 3 years of the BA-BSc program, and I'm joined by Jonathan, who is a student learning advisor, which I remember that correctly. Assistant, almost. And Jonathan is also a student as well. You've just finished your second year, correct, Jonathan?
Yeah, I've just finished my second year, and so I'll be going on into my third year, and I'm looking very forward to that.
Excellent. So later on, if you've got any questions about the kind of student experience and what it's like to study the course, Jonathan is very well positioned to answer those. And we're also joined by Max, who is a graduate academic assistant. And Max, do you want to explain what you do and what your role is?
It's a big role. I help out on game design, VFX, and basically all of media. Be in some of your classes to help with the tech and software. It's a very big role.
And Max is a game designer as well, of course. With a VR specialism, would you say?
Yeah, that's what I tell people. Specialize in VR.
Excellent. So I'll just stop that share just for a minute. So the first thing that we want to touch on a little bit here is just what is game design? Like, what does it actually involve? How does that dovetail with our course? And what do you actually do when you're studying game design? So what we consider game design is it's the act of designing a game. And when we say designing a game, what we're talking about in terms of our course is coming up with ideas for games, thinking about what the player actually does. Sometimes we call it moment-to-moment action, what the mechanics are going to be, what the theme is, maybe a little bit of kind of story writing, level design. So a lot of the kind of creative aspects of coming up with what games actually are. And we're also interested in the process of prototyping those ideas as well. So very much what we think about when we think about the skills of a game designer is the ability to communicate. And some of that might be communicating these ideas that we've discussed through writing what the game is and what the concept's about and who the characters are and what kind of challenges the player might face and that sort of thing. Or it might be a demonstration, a very early or rough implementation of a level, how it's supposed to play. And that could be from quite a high level, you know, what's the structure of the entire game, down to what we'd call like the low level. So what does the player actually do when, what happens when they pick up this item? What happens when they craft this particular thing, and how does it affect the game, and so forth. So really what we mean when we think about game design on this course is what experience are we creating and how do we create it? Now, something that I think it's important to touch upon is what kind of isn't game design in terms of this course. And I think you'll see, you know, like I mentioned before, from university to university, there are different interpretations or meanings of what game design is. So what game design isn't on this course is character design. kind of like concept art and iterative art practice and that sort of thing. There is actually another course in the university called 3D animation in games, which is far more of that sort of thing, really. So I think it's important to understand that within games as this medium that incorporates, you know, visuals and mechanics and sound design and all sorts of things. Lots of things get called game design necessarily, but kind of the role of a game designer or the job of a game designer is what we do, is the conceptualization and the communication and the kind of implementation for demonstration purposes of what the game is going to be and how you play it. So like I mentioned before, communication is the key thing that game designers do. It's your kind of bread and butter skill, really. You have to be able to communicate to the artists, to the programmers, to sound designers, to producers, to creative leads, all of these different people in a game design studio, what your idea is, what is your vision, what's your creative vision, what do you want the player to do, what experience do you want them to have, how do you want the player to feel as they're going through all of these different experiences in the game. You know, how does the player level up? What what items do they have at their disposal as they go through the experience? That's what we're really thinking about. And so communication is really important, but ideation, we talk about this on the course a lot, this idea of ideation is important as well, which is having loads of ideas and then trying to figure out, okay, which ones do I actually want to put in the game? Like, what is this game going to be? And so that kind of brings us on to what we're going to be looking at a little bit today, which is where do ideas come from? How do we create concepts for games? How do you begin to turn the seed of an idea that you have, that you're like, oh, that might be interesting, or no one's really done that before, into something you can develop and take forward and turn into a game? So our objective for this session is to create and communicate a concept for a game and some other essential information that you need to get the game idea across that you could use as a starting point for further development. So something that would be really great if you had by the end of this hour that we've got together is a seed for a game. We can point you in a direction and you can start to make that game. Something I'm very keen to point out to people all the time is you don't need anyone's permission to start making games. You can start making a game today. There's all kinds of tools available to you. You don't need to be a programmer to make a game. You don't need to have lots and lots of existing skill sets to begin making games. Okay, so anyone can start that process of making games. And so the outcome that we're looking to have today is we're going to have this game idea and we're going to have a little pitch for it too. So pitching this idea, and like I mentioned before, communicating is really important as well. So how are we going to do this? We're going to use something called Miro. And it's something that we've relied on, as you can imagine, a lot in the last year as a kind of collaborative space to put together ideas. Okay, so I'll show you what a Miro board looks like. I'm just going to share my screen for a moment. So hopefully you can all see that. So this is what Miro looks like. It's just a big kind of like collaborative board, really. You might have used it already, and you might have used some other similar things like Google Jamboard or something like that. And it just allows us to kind of drag and drop and move things around. And so we're going to use this today. And I'll give you the link for this. But essentially what we're going to do is we're going to use a little kind of structure to start coming up with a game idea. Now, we've got three different things here. We've got feelings, places, and actions. And one of the places that you can start for a game idea is a feeling. Okay, so one of the skills or roles of a game designer is that you're kind of a psychologist in a way. You're thinking about how people feel in particular situations. Okay, some might say you're a psychiatrist in some games, but really what we're thinking about is how do you want people to feel when you're playing a game? If you think about like the Dark Souls games or any of the kind of Souls games at all, there's a very definite intent in those games that is driven partially by the story and driven by the mechanics of, you want the game to feel really challenging, and you want players to feel relieved when they get through these different, boss fights or things like that. You want them to feel powerful when they overcome some of the earlier challenges from the game. So feelings are a really kind of powerful, important place for game designers to start for a game idea. And so we start with a feeling. And then we have to think about more specifically, where the game's going to take place. You know, how are we going to use different locations for our game, and sometimes that might inspire different aspects of gameplay. And you know, just what the player is able to do. Is it a game about exploration? Is it a game about relationships with co-workers or something like that? You know, all of these different places that we've got to inspire us. And then we can start to think about actions. What's the player going to do once they're in this space, and how do the actions that the player has make the player feel a certain way? You know, if you take one of these words for example, if we use tense. Let's say, how could we think about a game that makes the player feel tense and is set in a, let's say, in a skate park, but the actions are investigate, right? So that already gives you a starting point for maybe a kind of weird game. I don't know. Maybe it's not a skateboarding game. Maybe it's a game about investigating who's stolen your favorite skateboard or something like that. I don't know. So we have to think about what the player is actually going to be doing on this moment-to-moment basis. Okay, so what I'm going to do is you're free to join in with this if you want to, or if you just want to watch you know, others come up with ideas, that's absolutely fine. I'm going to give you a link to join this board, and then I'll give you some instructions for what we're going to do. And Jonathan, Max, and myself are going to come up with a really terrible game idea, because part of being a game designer is coming up with lots and lots of really horrible ideas before you get to the good one. So let me just stop sharing that for a second. And what I'm going to do is, let's just move that for a second. Okay, so if you'd like to join in, if you're on a computer, if you go to this URL, you can join in. And I believe it's also in the chat as well, if you want to click on the link there.
Yeah, I've put it in the chat as well.
Excellent, thank you very much. Cool, okay, so I can see a few of you in there already. And I'll explain what we're going to do with this in a moment as well. In fact, I'll give you the first part of what we're doing. While you log in. So I'm just going to, again, just take down that for a moment and bring back Miro. Okay. So the first thing that you can do, and it's a good little intro to how to use Miro as well, is somewhere, maybe before all of these, you know, before we start to think about our feelings and the places that the game could take place in and the things that the player's actually going to do, it's always a good point to start to think about your favorite games and the things that you like to play. Because as designers, as game designers, the direction of what we make is often inspired by the stuff that we've played maybe when we were young, maybe stuff that we're playing now. And so it's always a really great starting point to think about what you like to play. So if you want to join in, the first thing that I'm going to have you do is, and Max, Jonathan, you can do your own ones of these as well, is if you click over here, there's a little post-it note icon, sticky note. You can choose any color sticky note you want and just click in here. Maybe you could put your name on there and just type in 3 of your favorite games and then maybe a couple of words of what it is that you like about them. Okay, so it can be absolutely anything, any of your favorite games at all. And then that gives you some kind of starting place for, you know, thinking about, ooh, what am I going to make? So I'm going to put a couple of mine in here. My favorite game is Gunstar Heroes, which is an old Mega Drive game. And the thing I really like about that title is that you have a bunch of different weapons, but you can mix and match them together, and you can kind of experiment with them. And it gives you a bit of kind of agency over playing the game. So I'll put mix and match weapons. That's good. What have you got on? What have you got on yours, Max? You've got Final Fantasy.
Fantasy 14. Like a story and lore, and the look of your armor, and also housing.
Yeah, I think like the look of your character is a big thing for me as well. I was just trying to think about what my favorite game is for like character customization. I think it might be, do you know what? I really do like Saints Row 4. I'm gonna put Saints Row 4 in there as well. Customization, there we go. Yes, someone's got Just Cause 3. Just Cause 3, much better than Just Cause 4. I've got to say. I think it's a better looking game as well. Excellent, okay. And then, Jonathan, what have you got on yours? Have you got an example?
Yeah, it's right here. Right here. Last of Us 2 for story, graphics, character backgrounds, and good use of mechanics. And I put in brackets rules because game mechanics are rules. I put F1 2020 for simulation and realism with how accurate it can be, or as true to life as it can be. And then I put Genshin Impacts for the story, the art style, and just the abilities or combat system as well. I've been really enjoying that game recently.
Excellent. Okay. Someone just asked what you could put into them. You can just put in the names of the games themselves. If you want to, you can add in a couple of, you can put in, you know, a couple of words just to do with what it is about those games. It's just this is our starting point, basically. It's the seed of what we like to play. And I find that the kind of games that I usually come up with often stem from Gunstar Heroes in some way. Like there's something about that game that's left a very kind of like indelible mark on my game design brain. And sometimes it's to do with the platforming, and sometimes it's to do with the weapons. Sometimes it's to do with the look of it. Sometimes it's to do with the story. So one of the things as a game designer is you've always got to have these different parts of the game in your brain. You're the kind of, as a game designer, you're the architect of the experience, right? So whereas lots of other areas of working in games, you know, you're kind of thinking about a lot about art all in one go, and you're thinking about like the implementation and how things work. The designer has to think about all of them, like even music and things that you might not necessarily have any musical skill in at all, but you've got to go back to this feeling and how you want the player to kind of be propelled through this experience, and think about, oh, how do I want the music to be? And then you need to be able to talk to a musician about that stuff. Cool. Okay, so we've got some good ideas here. Glad to see. Did I see the Lion King represented somewhere? Ah, yeah, the Mega Drive, Lion King Mega Drive. That game, those Disney games, excellent animation. I think Max, you and me talk about that quite on a few occasions. That Aladdin game, really good animation as well.
Yes, but the Lion King's third level, or second level, sorry, is very, very difficult.
Is that the one that's like the Stampede and it's like 3D?
There's the ostrich level.
Oh, when you're jumping on the ostrich, it's I just can't wait to be king level, isn't it? When it's like, or am I thinking of something else?
That's it. Yeah, it just can't do that double jump timing. It's
yeah, that's right. And you're playing as little Simba still, so you only have the little roar that turns the bugs upside down. Excellent. Okay, cool. Nice examples there. Glad to see those. So let's think about our next step, which is going to be starting to get inspired. So if you're happy with the games that you've written down on your Post-it note, what you can do now is, if you see this little ideas box, if you copy it, you can do Control-C or Command-C and Command-V, and just take your own copy of it and just put it somewhere near your Post-it note. You can feel free to move your things. In fact, Max and Jonathan, you and me will work on the same one. Should we put all of our, we'll put all of ours over here.
Sure.
We'll do one idea together and talk it through for everyone. So yeah, so all you need to do, for those of you who are joining in, just click on this ideas box here, copy it. So it's Control-C or Command-C and then Command-V, and then you can just put your own copy of it somewhere. Excellent. And then the idea here is to start to think about feelings and places. So as I mentioned before, our starting point for a game concept is often this feeling. You know, what do we want our players to feel? How does that link to some of the games that we play? How do we like to feel? Do we like to feel powerful when we play games? If you think about a game like Max Payne, you know, you burst through the doors with 2 guns and all of the characters like, it's Max Payne. And so it creates this sense of power in the narrative and also like in the abilities that you have. So how do you like to feel when you play games? Or do you like to feel very, very vulnerable or that you could die at any moment? You know, there are a lot of games like that. Maybe like, I haven't played it myself, but I get the impression like Hollow Knight's a little bit like that. You know, it's quite a difficult game. So anyway, so what you would do with these first 2 areas are, how do you want people to feel when they're playing the game? Where could it take place and what kind of stories could happen there? And so have a look over all of these different feelings and all of these different places. You can zoom right in here and have a real good look at all of these different places. And then again, just copy and paste anything at all that's interesting to you. Again, this is one of the things about games is we have to take this kind of scattershot approach, ideation. You know, you'll come up with loads and loads of ideas. It doesn't matter if they're good or bad or anything like that at all. So to start with, just focus on taking some feelings and some places. We'll worry about the actions later, and just put those on your little idea board. Okay. So Jonathan and Max, we're going to look at some feelings. We're going to share our feelings and think about something that we could make, a game we could put together. So I'll let you both select as many as you want. The feelings can be in conflict with each other as well. They don't have to necessarily be the same thing. And you could start to also think about how some of these might link up to the locations, like Lucky and a casino obviously have a relationship together. So how could you create a game that we're in a casino where you just want the player to feel lucky all the time? Because that's quite a challenge, because the whole thing about like gambling in games is that there's always got to be the danger that you're not going to win, right? So if you're lucky all the time, does it become boring? You know, so what feeling could our game be about? I've got some already. Excellent. Challenged, vengeful, curious. I'm going to start throwing in a couple of places into ours. I like games on trains. Let's have a train.
What, like a train driving simulator or just a scene?
Oh yeah, like Venture to Go or something like that. Could be a train driving simulator. It could be a game where you're a passenger, or it could be a game where you're
sorry,
or a game where you're the driver.
Yeah.
Could be a game where you're not on the train. You're trying to get on the train. It's like moving really fast.
That actually opens up an idea.
Oh, there we go. I like the idea of vengeful. Space train. There we go.
Space train.
Space train. Did you just put the space one in, Max?
Did.
That's fantastic. I love it.
Should we turn our EVE Online game into a space game?
Okay, so we're at the moment. I've got this vision in my head of like an interplanetary train that like it goes around planets like in Mario Galaxy somehow, and then you have to untether it, and it goes in space, and then I don't know. Inventive. Maybe it's like Banjo-Kazooie nuts and bolts, and you have like different tracks on your train, or not different tracks. Sorry, you have different carts on your train.
Yeah.
You have to like build stuff to allow you to like navigate these different environments, these different planets.
When I put in inventive, for some reason, Minecraft came to mind, like some sort of sandbox game.
Yeah. Maybe it's a game where you're laying the track like Wallace and Gromit, you know, like
yeah.
you have to like the train is always moving at a certain speed, and you've got to run out and like mine a bunch of stuff and turn it into tracks before the train runs out of tracks.
Yeah. I added in the image of the city there.
Okay.
I thought we could well, because what I thought of was, say, obviously, with space, the train and the tracks, like, you know, obviously a space train theme.
Yeah.
Maybe incorporate some sort of like alienized city that's like floating in space or something.
Yeah. Let's look back over our game inspirations and see if there's anything we can see. I'm looking at Max. I'm looking at the armor glamours and stuff from Final Fantasy. I'm like, can we make the train like? You should be able to like make the train look really nice. I want to do a photo shoot with the train. Like that would be amazing. So it's kind of like a train. What if it's like a train? I want to say, I was going to say train dating simulator. That's not what I had in my head exactly, but like it's all about the train, right? It's like it's the train is the thing, and you're trying to make it look. Yeah. Basically, I'm thinking games where you, instead of thinking about like armor and clothing, it's like what bits does a train have? Like you can make like the chimney stack like really beautiful and like have it all ornate and crafted and stuff. So there's two aspects to the game. Sorry, Max, go on.
At the beginning of Firefly, when forgotten his name. Google his name real quick.
Is it thingy, the main character?
Shepard.
Yeah.
Shepard, he's walking around trying to figure out which ship he wants to go on.
Oh, okay, yeah.
Maybe if you were like if you were able to glamour the train.
Yeah, you could get it to yeah. All right, I like that. Let's see what other folks are coming up with so far. We've got some feelings so far over here. Heroic, skilled. Yeah, these are all good. These kind of all link into each other, don't they? That's good. So if you all want to, now with your feelings, you can start to put in some places if you want to. So just copy and paste some of these images, anything that seems interesting to you or feels like it links with those feelings. So one of the other things we talk about in game design as well, especially in the third year, is we talk a bit about kind of flipping expectations. Like think of a game that you like and then flip the objective. So what about a racing game where you have to come last? Like what would that look like? Or a deathmatch game where you're trying to die or you're trying to get killed by the other players. So how, where is there an interesting concept there in flipping the objective of some of these well-known genres? So maybe thinking about some of these locations would help you to think about that. So how could we make, oops, just accidentally dragged the whole thing away. So how could we make a game about, let's have a look at some of these ideas over here. An intelligent, nostalgic, skilled, inventive. I'm feeling a bit of like a kind of mystery game over here, like maybe a detective game. What would a detective game look like if it was set in where are detective games never usually set? Maybe a nuclear power plant. Or
deserted island.
A deserted island, yeah, exactly. And what about a murder mystery game where you're the only person on the island?
That's Subnautica for that.
Yeah, that's right. That does sound like Subnautica.
Figure out what happened.
Yeah. So you go over to the ship and it's full of weird spiders.
Apologies for anyone who's arachnophobic.
Yeah. So yeah, feel free to grab any of these pictures at all. And again, just like you can grab one, like there's an abandoned farm here. That's quite cool. And then just put that on your, you can put that on it. So if you copy and paste them, it just leaves them on the board in case anyone else wants them as well. So, but yeah. Excellent. Okay, so far, let's go back to our idea. I'm feeling this kind of train crafting, track building game, I guess. Maybe it's in some kind of city where there is no track, but there are like obstacles in the way, so you've got to like build the track around them maybe.
I'm also thinking, instead of a city, maybe a junkyard of some sorts, some place that you can collect parts to upgrade your train.
Oh, what if they're toy trains?
Okay, I see where you're going with this.
Okay, picture this. They're toy trains, right? So everything's at a small scale, but then you are normal human scale, and you have to walk around the junkyard and find the bits to like glamour up your train.
So kind of like, oh, that would be interesting because it's like, you know how people have those like realistic train model sets?
Yes.
It'll be exactly like that.
Yeah, because there's a pleasure in that, isn't there? Like collecting trains and like Hornby train sets and things like that.
There's something that really oddly cute about like miniature models and stuff.
Yeah.
Don't you find? Like, because I have, oh, you won't see it, but like on my shelf, the lighting's terrible in my room. I have a Hornby Eurostar model.
Yeah.
Yes.
There you go.
Max.
Max has got her inspiration right there. I promise everyone this wasn't planned.
One sec.
I had no idea what game this was going to be. Excellent.
One sec. I'll bring my train forward.
I don't have a train in here to share. I only have Ecto 1 Lego set, so I've got the best I can do is the Ghostbusters. That's all I've got within reach.
So I have the front locomotive of it.
Look at this. It was meant to be this train concept.
It has like little pantographs as well that come up. I don't know how well you can see that, but it has one back pantograph and one forward facing pantograph.
Okay, you even know what those things are called.
Yeah, I did some research on what they are.
I'm totally sold on this idea then, so that's fantastic.
I even know the voltage requirements as well for the overhanging lines. It's 25 kilovolts.
Excellent. This actually makes a fantastic point about game design, which is that like if you bring in your things that so the best game designers are always ones who've got interests about things outside of games. So if you've got interest in anything at all that could drive a game that isn't just other games, that's really great as well. Okay, that's fantastic. So a bunch of you have got you've got a setting, you've got some feelings, that's fantastic. So the next thing we're going to do is we're going to bob over to our actions pool. And you can see we've got all kinds of different words in there that represent gameplay. Or like I mentioned before, it mentions or concern moment-to-moment gameplay. What does the player actually do on a moment-to-moment basis as they go through the game? Okay, so you can pick some of these words, think about what you want the player to do. It's quite straightforward, really. What does the player do on a moment-to-moment basis? What tools, abilities, or skills have they got access to? So explore some of those adjectives in the action space, and then you can just copy and paste those into your into that. We'll spend a couple of minutes on that, and then we'll move on to the next part, because then we can actually start to write down our idea. Fantastic. Yes, I'm really into this. Yes, construct. We need the word construct, don't we?
Not the game engine.
Are we still having the space aspect in this? Maybe you're like, maybe it's like a little junkyard planet, and that when you complete one junkyard planet, you go on to another one. It's like the train tracks are in you're constructing the train tracks, and it's like on a big sphere, like Mario Galaxy.
I don't know why I put fly there, but I put fly there for some reason. Space and spaceships flying. I don't know.
Well, I was just thinking something that's quite fun in games is where the failure state of the game is fun. Like I'm just thinking like Burnout Paradise, where when you crash the car, it's like, oh, I crashed my car, but I got to see this really cool explosion. So
yeah,
maybe in our game, when you run out of track, you fly off into space.
That's part of it. Different gravities and different planets, meaning your train can do different things.
Exactly. There we go.
That's true. That's very true.
Right there. Brilliant.
This isn't a planet, so to speak. Actually, I don't know if it is a planet. It's technically a moon of Saturn, Titan. The gravity there is it large, or is it greater than Earth, or is it less than Earth, or something like that?
It's heavy, isn't it? It's more gravity.
But it made me think of something else as well, because on Titan, like raindrops are they're so much larger than the ones on Earth. So you think of like a raindrop on Earth, it's tiny, right? On average, one on Titan is like this big. So it's like it would like, maybe we can think about like how different weather on different planets could affect the train or something like that.
I see a few of you have got some gameplay. That's great. So just to move on to the next section, just because I'm aware of time as well. The kind of last step of this really is to actually describe the idea. So again, this is like a very distilled version of what we do in game design when we think about game concepts, which is we think about what the game is actually going to be. So we've got a second little box down here, which is our high concept box. Okay, and so what you can do with that is you can take a copy of this as well. So I'll just copy this and put it over by your ideas. Oh, we've already got one. Excellent.
Sorry, Josh.
No, it's fine. It's great. And then you can see, sorry if maybe it's just my monitor, but the gray text is a bit light, but it says there are basically 3 things to think about. And the 3 things I put in here, if you've never done it before, these are 3 kind of really critical things that you have to have in what we call a game design document. And for a game designer, the game design document or the design documentation is basically where you explain the idea. You explain what the game is as a whole, you explain what the player actually does, and there's a little bit of kind of game design terminology that we're going to introduce you to here that might help you to think about how you could develop your own game concept. The first one is what we call the high concept. And the easiest way that I usually think about this, or the easiest way I explain it, is to think about, let's say that you're on Steam, or that you're looking at the back of a game box and you're reading the description of the game. What does it say? Like, how does it get across to you in as short a space as possible what this game is not only about, but what you do? Okay. So what's the name of the game? What genre is it? So is it a shoot? Is it a shoot 'em up? Is it a beat 'em up? Is it a first-person shooter? Is it a puzzle game? Where does the game take place and who is the player? So what's their role? That's really important, because the player, or the prospective player, when they're thinking about buying your game, needs to know who they are, what are they going to do, and what's the broad narrative or theme of the game. So I've written just a fictitious one here, just to give you an example. So if I was reading about a game, if I was reading what the high concept of a game was, I might say something like, Greylight Manor is a first-person survival horror game that challenges the player to explore an endless library of the arcane, armed with little more than a flashlight and the intent to discover more about the curse that's plagued their family for generations. Okay, so it's a little bit of a mouthful, but it's a little bit of kind of like marketing text in some ways. It gets across exactly what the game is. So that's your high concept. That's almost the most important part of a game design document, because you've got to hook people in. And when I say people, it might be players, but really it's about hooking in the rest of your development team, because you need to get everybody on board with your creative vision and what it is that you're going to make. Okay. The second part's the core mechanic. What's the key action of the game? What does the player repeat as they go throughout the game? And you might think, oh, that's quite a lot to explain, but really in games there's usually 1 or 2 things that you do throughout the whole experience. If you think about like Sonic the Hedgehog or Mario, you jump on things, you jump on enemies, you jump on platforms, you jump down pipes, you jump into mushrooms, and so forth. So any platform game is really just about the jumping and all that, and you might use that jump in like 5 or 6 different ways to get through the game, but you're still jumping on stuff. And if you think about a game like Minecraft, yes, you can. Minecraft, you can build anything and you can create lots and lots of different things. But the main thing that you're doing is that you're gathering resources and then using them to do stuff, right? Like that's everything in Minecraft. It's not a mechanically complex game. It's complex in terms of what you can do with your imagination and how you put those different components together. But you're basically taking stuff from somewhere and using it either to put it somewhere else, or you're making something and then putting that somewhere else. If you want to simplify even more, in Minecraft's a game about picking things up and putting them down. Like you don't really do too much else other than that when you really get down to it. It's just that the graphics are delightful and the music's nice, and there's all sorts of different things that you can pick up and they interact with each other in different ways. And some of them are cute dogs and you can pet the dog. And that's the most important thing of all, really, isn't it? And then finally, we've got something called our core gameplay loop. And this is a way of you thinking about, okay, the player's got 1 core mechanic. what are they doing? What's the repeated action throughout the whole game? What's the goal? What's the challenge? And what's the reward? So let's go back to our Sonic the Hedgehog example, because I grew up as a Sega kid, so why not? The goal in Sonic the Hedgehog is to get through the level before the timer runs out. Okay. The challenge is that there's loads of different platforms and enemies in the way. And the reward is that there's a couple of different rewards. You get a high score if you do it quickly. You get to go to the next level. If you get a high score, you might unlock points or a continue or something like that. That's the gameplay loop. Is goal, get to the end of the level, challenge, get through the enemies and level without dying, and then the reward is that you get to play more of the game. And then obviously more modern games have more complex reward systems than that. You know, if you think about like a game like Fallout or Skyrim or something, the rewards are, you know, it might be a quest reward or money reward and all sorts of different things, but they usually is one core loop that's repeating through the whole game. And if you think about a complex RPG like Skyrim, it's usually pick up a quest. The quest means you've got to go into a cave and kill like some goblins without dying or something, and the reward is whatever you get as a result of going through the cave, or as a reward from the quest giver or something like that. You can map that onto most RPGs. So it's the core thing your player is doing. And ideally, the core thing that your player is doing and the core mechanic and the high concept should all evoke the feelings that you chose earlier on. So what is it about Sonic the Hedgehog? The feeling of Sonic the Hedgehog is that you should be going fast, right? You're going fast all the time. So how do we reward going fast? Well, if you go through the levels faster, you get a high score. Yeah, so everything you do should feed into the feelings that you want the player to have. How do you make the player feel strong? How do you make them feel powerful? How do you make them feel feared by all of the enemies in the game? You know, it could be little things. If you go back to my Max Payne example from earlier, the fact that the enemies yell out, "Oh God, it's Max Payne," when you come in the thing, it's like they're afraid of you before you do anything. So it makes you feel powerful. There's all sorts of little things that you can do in games that help to make players feel a certain way. So anyway, I've waffled on a lot. We need to design this train game that we've come up with while the rest of you write out your games, which hopefully you've done a little bit of already. Which would be great. So yeah, so if you've got your little concept board here, feel free just to fill that in. Just explain what your game is. There's no pressure at all. You know, like it can be as detailed or as economic in detail as you like. It's just there to give you a starting point. You know, this whole process is there just to get you started on what a game could be. You know, what is it that you're making or could make? Cool. Okay, so should we write out our high concept?
Yeah.
Shall I do the high concept and then so let's see. So we need to get this across quite quickly. So it's we're going to call the game?
That's what I was thinking as you were talking. See, I don't know, but like I really want to like. Oh, my first intention or instinct was like include the name train or space into it, but I just can't think of anything that goes well with it for some reason. Train space.
This is what game designers really do, which is sit around a table and try and think about what they should call their game. I'm working on something at the moment actually, and I cannot think of a name for it, and it's really like I often need the title at the start to like drive the rest of the concept. Like I find it really helpful to think of the name first.
Yeah, I'm working on a couple of things right now.
Astroloco.
Astroloco. Oh.
Astroloco.
Max.
Thank you.
Of course. I love it. Right, Astroloco is a crafting train. Is it? What do we do? It's a puzzle. Gosh, how do we? It's a crafting.
A puzzle-based train crafting simulator. I don't know.
Okay, that sounds good. Is a puzzle-based train crafting simulator where players must build the most attractive train possible, toy train possible. You said it's in a
yes. model train.
Yeah, massive model train. Yeah, sorry, they're not toys, they're models. It's not a toy, it's an action, it's a collectible. Build the most attractive model train possible using parts scavenged from a planetoid scrapyard.
Yeah.
And this is not the most elegant game description I've ever written, but it'll get the game across. Again, game design, lots of redrafting of like what the ideas are. And again, it's this process of ideation, because obviously you might write the high concept to yourself at the beginning of the process, but then like kind of edit the idea a little bit later on.
And by the way,
sorry, Jonathan, go ahead.
By the way, everyone who's attending us today, so usually a lot of this stuff, such as the high concept and the core gameplay loop and core mechanics, it goes into a massive document that's full of everything else that makes up a game called a game design document. And yeah, there's often in games design a lot of drafting, rewriting stuff, and just looking over things. There's a lot of like writing to it as well. So yeah, I just want
to so that, actually just to pick up on that, I've got some examples here. They're on paper because something we haven't got time for right now is that sometimes getting your ideas across. Jonathan, or Max, can I give over the high concept for you to finish off while I just talk?
Sure.
Is that often it's easier to get your ideas across with sketches. And again, you don't have to be any great artist to do this. It's just about communication, because, the stuff that you might be drawing is not like player focused stuff. It's stuff to explain how something's supposed to work. So these are pretty kind of common style. I'll just hold them up. These are little kind of mechanical sketches that you might see that help to explain how something might work in the game. And again, it's not necessarily there to look nice. It's there to get across how something is supposed to work. So again, if you've got an idea for how something should move or a particular mechanic, then you can draw it. And these are actually, for me, these are quite like neat examples. In fact, I've got a real example. I should be honest with you and show you a real example of what my sketches look like while I'm designing something. And sometimes they look like this. They're horrible, but they're there to get the concept across in your own mind. And then when you're satisfied, you can prototype it. You can create it on paper with counters and move them around. A lot of this process of design is prototyping, because the thing about games is that you have to be able to play an early version of something to know whether it's going to work, or whether it's going to be fun or enjoyable, or whether it's going to deliver on some of those feelings that you've established at the beginning of the project. So that's why you really need to play the game from a really early point. And it doesn't mean you have to have this like very, very polished kind of complete version of the game to know whether it's good. Game designers will prototype things at a tiny, tiny micro level to see whether they work, on paper, using coins, using anything you can find, building models out of Lego even sometimes. Something I like to do for level design stuff is to I might like lay something out in Photoshop, like a rough idea of the level, and then I'll print it out and then I'll like draw all over it, just to like get a sense of like, okay, what am I actually trying to achieve here?
I have a horrible example as well for the Android game that I made this year. It was just like the layout of my level and such. I apologize that you can't really see it well, but
no, it's good to see that, Jonathan. Yeah, a lot of kind of messy sketching, and again, it's part of this whole process of ideation, of creating concepts. It's just like so much stuff that you're trying to you're trying to understand.
Also, I don't think we can edit the text box when you're editing it, Josh.
Oh, I'm sorry. Okay. I'll finish off our explanation and we'll have a look at everyone else's. You misbuild the most attractive train models needs to go from as well as the tracks that it moves along.
Instead of moves along, can we maybe put Oh, it's jumped my mind now. I had a different word other than moves. No, it's gone out my mind. Locomotes. I don't know.
Oh, tasty. I like that. There we go. Maybe it might be quick or like get smoked or something. I don't know. Like I'm just trading puns now. Our core mechanic is mining stuff, right? Like
yeah,
like finding.
I'd say it's collecting resources. I'd say there's also some form of strategy to it if we're going to have
Carefully selecting.
Yeah, exactly, and also organizational skills as well.
Yeah, maybe you have an inventory that you have to organize your bits into.
Yeah.
So so it's a crafting thing, really. It's like gathering, crafting items and constructing train parts, and also laying track as the train moves, something like that.
Yeah.
It's a very nascent idea, but it's there.
I feel like our core mechanic kind of helps us massively for the core gameplay loop. So I guess your well, the goal is to
keep the train moving, right? Like
yeah. The challenge is that I guess if
no track, but there's stuff in the way, right? Like
or finding or maybe like resource management would be the challenge. But
I mean, it's like because I'm thinking you're like walking around the scrapyard, but the train is still moving, so you got to like go and get stuff and bring it back. There's like a time-based aspect to it.
Yeah.
And then the reward could be
win. I don't know.
Train glamour.
Yeah, fancy train glamour.
there you go. That's it. So your reward is that you get stuff to make your train look nice, but all of the stuff you scavenge is to basically like make the train better.
Yeah.
And all the stuff you get rewarded is to make it pretty.
I feel like this would be a really good like mobile game as well.
Yeah.
Like I can totally see I can totally see people just playing this like on their way to work or something. Like for like however long their journey is.
I forgot this. Also, you're in space.
Also, you're in space.
All right, awesome. Let's see what everyone else has got here. So, excellent. This one looks really detailed. Oops, sorry, whoever this is. I'm moving your things around. Let's have a look. All right, high concept. Games over. A Souls-like game where you play as a self-aware game character, where unlike normal Souls-like games, you constantly die only to respawn. Your aim as character is to actually get to a final game of screen you delve into actual game code. Oh, I like that. Yeah, I like games that kind of bridge the gap between the player as the author of the game and the player of the game. That's nice. Yeah, code blocks. That's great. Yeah, something that's worth mentioning here as well, just as a side thing, is like games like this that inspire like coding. In the second year, and Jonathan can attest to this, you do a module called games coaches, and we look at what we call serious games in there, which are like games for learning and like how you can use games to teach people. And one of the skills of a game designer, I think, in that space is to create a game that feels like a video game that people actually want to play, but is teaching you, doesn't feel kind of like dry and educational. It's something that actually feels like a video game. So that would be a great serious game concept right there. Awesome. Let's see. Got one up here. One still in progress, but that's okay.
I like the smiley face.
Yeah. I'm liking the blend of places here. I'm wondering, how are these going to come together? How does the kind of suburbia housing thing and underwater and the cruise ship come together? That's cool. I'm imagining like a Bioshocky kind of thing for some reason. Excellent. Good. Okay. So So I guess the thing, you know, I'm just kind of in closing for this, it's hopefully this has given you like the ability to kind of like come up with the starting point for a game. And as I mentioned at the beginning of the session, you don't need anyone's permission to start making games. And I think that, you know, there's some really nice ideas there and starting points for thinking about how the player feels and like how you can create mechanics and scenarios and settings that the player can exist within in order to you know, bring those scenarios to life, I guess. And so what can you do with this concept now you've got it? Well, you can refine it further and you can think a bit more about some of the things we've talked about. You could start to make an aspect of it. You know, like I said, you could start to draw out, like I've showed you some of the sketches that I've done, you know, different mechanics and levels. How could you develop it a little bit further? All of the current most popular game making tools are free. And that, a lot of people don't always know that, you know, like Unreal Engine, it's free. Unity, it's free. Twine is a kind of narrative, interactive story-based game creator. That's free and it's web-based. Construct 3 has a free version.
And on the games design course, we use predominantly Unity, but you do sort of in the first year delve into like another game engine called Adventure Games Studio. Is that it?
Yeah, AGS. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, so all of these tools are free, and or there's free versions of them. And you know, today you could go download Unity and start going through some of the kind of early tutorials for it, and that would kind of stand you in good stead for the course as well. Or you could just focus on the design side of things. Like I said, you could start creating your own game design documents. If you Google online, there's all sorts of resources for how to structure a game design document. And kind of like what that looks like.
Josh, there's a really good question in the chat.
Yes.
About what percentage of graduates go on to work in the industry.
I don't have those figures in front of me. I know that in terms of people who've studied on the course before, we've got a student who worked for CD Projekt Red.
Yeah.
We've got students who've gone on to work at mobile companies. We're a relatively young course. I think this is only our third. I think this is our third graduating year. So we're still kind of like tracking which students have actually gone on to those careers. But I think in terms of the class graduating last year and the one graduating this year, some of them already got jobs lined up, and they're already going on to work on things as well, which is really good.
And another fun.
Sorry, I can't give you a specific percentage, but.
Another fun thing that you also get to do on the course are these kind of like events that pop up. So we'll have guest speakers come in, and sometimes, yeah, it's been a little bit difficult to like get that, or a bit different to get that organized with, you know, the whole coronavirus pandemic going on. We've had to host them here on Zoom. But we also on Games Design use Discord for communication as well, between lecturers and students and whatnot. So that makes it a lot easier than doing it through Zoom as well, just for like casual questions. But we'll have guest speakers come in, and I remember I went to one of them last year, not academic year, but when I was in my first year, and it was Ben Neisen. I'm sorry if I'm mispronouncing his second name. Who works at Mediatonic.
He works on Fall Guys, and
yeah, he works on Fall Guys.
Yeah.
So that was really cool to meet him. But the point is that you always have opportunities to speak to people from the industry on the course, so you can really like ask them questions as well, which I think is quite good.
The Discord server is quite a vibrant community. We've got all of our alumni are on there as well, so those who go into industry are still in contact with the current students, the first, second, and third years. So there's always this idea of like kind of hopefully paying it back a little bit, and some of our alumni students will be able to help others, you know, with employment as well. So just in closing from me, before I can take any more questions, is you know, you've got access to all of those things online that you could use to make games with. Get inspired by other people's games, you know, go on itch.io and play stuff, and, you know, try and kind of analyze them and think about what they're doing that you like and what they're doing that, you know, you feel like you could improve upon. And then if you want to do any further reading, or if you want to get started just thinking a bit more about game design and game design practice, there's a really great book called Theory of Fun by Raf Costa. And it's a really, really good kind of like quite gentle introduction to the field of game design and design theory and what fun is and how we can create fun and how we think about entertainment in games and that sort of thing. So yeah, that's just called A Theory of Fun. So if you want to look that up, go ahead. But other than that, we're happy to take any more questions.
I think there was one more, Josh, in the chat.
Okay, is it possible to take it with computer science course as well? Not the game design course, because the game design course is a full-time course. There is the difference between the course. So on game design, you can do a BA route or a BSc route, and that affects your what award you get at the end of the course, basically, but also a little bit of your module selections as well, and kind of the general area and direction of your third year project. But what I would say is that game design, I kind of stressed at the beginning of the session that, the field of game design is specifically about game design. It's not about games art, but also it's not a programming course either. So you will do programming and you will do some programming, but it's really there to kind of facilitate the basic kind of prototyping that I talked about that you need as a means of communication to get across your ideas to other people. So I think, Jonathan, again, you can probably speak to this, like, you do programming, don't you? But you're never expected to like be the role of a programmer who has to, the weight of the whole game rests on your shoulders. It's more just like, what can you do? Yeah, sorry. God,
sorry,
I'll let you talk.
Sorry. So the main language that you'll use is C#, and that's just because Unity. That's just what Unity uses. You will delve into, especially on AGS, you'll delve into some C++, and that's also what the Unreal Engine uses as well. But as for like a games design thing, as a games design student at Middlesex, C# will be your main language, and obviously, like, you're not expected to be a programmer, as Josh just said, but the main things as far as I use are honestly, like, a lot of the times I'm reusing my scripts that I've done from previous projects, and it's usually things like character controllers, death trigger scripts, scene management scripts, so we can switch between different scenes to load different levels. Trying to think what else. Those are my main
character controller stuff. Like, a lot of it's character controller stuff.
Yeah. I know that Unity has its own character controller like package now, but sometimes I just prefer to like just hard code it. I don't know why, but
thanks for sharing your itch page, Jonathan. I hadn't seen that before.
No, that's okay. I've had it since college, ever since you taught me in college, Josh.
So yeah, it's important that you have some experience of doing that stuff. I'd say, like, if you want to do computer science, that's a whole different field really, and it's got its own set of possibilities of what you could go off and study. Game design is very much about, like, if you want to go into the field of games as a designer, as someone who's the architect of those experiences and thinking about mechanics and the sort of stuff that we've been doing today a little bit. That's the key, really.
Yeah. Does anyone else have any questions? Yeah. Could be anything. I was going to say something about the course. I'm not sure if we can give the Discord server link out until you're on the course.
Yeah, but it's a closed server just for students, just to keep it, just so we can keep it self-contained. But if you enroll on the course, then you join it straight away. And we do a lot of course communication through it. We do events through it, and so forth. And it's a nice, vibrant place. It's really come into its own over the last year, actually. Both staff and students are on it.
I could screen share if you want. I could show them and through screen share if you want.
I think it's probably best we keep it.
Sure.
Keep it for just the students at the moment, because I don't know what's on there right now. Like, there might be some private stuff on there. So.
In the Q&A section, we have a question. Is it possible to easily switch to the more artistic side of games design?
So I would say like I guess theoretically you could start off on one course and switch, but I think it's something that if you feel like that's the direction that you want to go into, I'd start from the beginning, because you don't generally want to be in a position to switch courses and then you've like missed some of the course content. So I think if you feel like you're not sure, the best thing to do is to, come to events like this, which is really good, but just read up about what some of the different like career opportunities are around some of those things. And it will also, of course, depend on what you've already studied and what you've kind of done. I mean, a lot of the art courses are a bit more focused on like you having a portfolio as part of your application as well. I'm not sure what the 3D animation and games entry requirements are. Portfolio, yeah. So you would have to have done some kind of like figure drawing already, experimentation of like mediums and media and so forth. It's a whole different set, and that's one of the things why I want to be quite clear with everyone what game design really, what it is in terms of our course and what it can mean elsewhere, because they are like quite different things. If you look up any job that is or industry role that is called like game designer, that's usually more along the lines of what we do.
I have something to add to that.
That's going to be more like something else.
I have something to add to that as well, and I will kind of counteract what I'm about to say. But on the games design course, I'm not sure if this is the same for every course at Middlesex, but in terms of like how grades actually like work and such, your first year, obviously you should always do your hardest, but as far as I'm aware, it's the second year where it really starts counting towards like the final degree. However, you should always aim as high as you can on anything that you do. We'll have at Middlesex, you have two types of assignments. You have formative assignments and then you have summative assignments. The former of the two are not graded, so they're kind of just used to gain feedback, but they're still extremely important so that you know roughly what direction you're going in and like where you can improve things if say you need to improve things. And I, as a second year student, I still need to improve quite a few things, admittedly. And then the summative assessments, which are graded, and those go towards your final grades at the end of the year and whatnot. And then you can, at the end of the year, around about this time, they'll show up on the system as what you got. And then I think that also translates into the credits for the module as well, which I believe there's 30 available for each module, I think.
Yeah, I think all of ours are 30 credit modules. Some of them.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's right. I'm trying to remember how many 60 credit modules. I don't think we do. Yeah.
It is a really fun course, though. You get to learn about so much stuff, and
I think one of the main things we look for in students is to like have this passion for games and a passion to create games. And have an open mind and have where possible interests in some other areas that are going to drive your desire to create games. I think that it's important to understand that creating games is a field, it is a vocation, it's a job. It isn't just like playing stuff, although we do play stuff, and that is a really important part of being a designer. But it's something that you have to kind of like work at. We do a lot of like writing and communication and like presentation work, because like I mentioned before, the communication side of things is what designers do. And that can be often that is you finding your own way of how you best communicate ideas. I still find that I communicate best when I do little sketches and annotate them and things like that. But as a designer, sometimes you might find better at writing, you're better at explaining things. And so we help you to develop skills in all of those different areas. Some people just need to dive in and do a prototype to get across to other people what it is that they're doing. So we kind of help you to develop those skills as well.
Yeah. We have another question in the Q&A section.
So one thing that, to elaborate on the last question, if I wanted to do the art for the game I'm designing, would that be allowed despite not doing an art course? Max, did you want to address that one?
I was going to say, you could do the art, like we have some students who go off and learn some 3D modeling, but it's not when you're being graded, the art side isn't going to be taken into account. So you can do it if you want to, but it won't affect your grade at all.
Yeah, exactly. It's like, it's something we wouldn't discourage you from doing necessarily, but what we would say to you is if you're doing a level design, sometimes the art can like get in the way of the design work, because what you need to be able to do when you're designing a level is think about the structure of it, and you need to be able to move things around easily. That's why you often have like checkerboard textures just on blocks, because what you're primarily focused on is the design, the kind of fun, the implementation of it. And you might want to do a couple of pieces of artwork, 3D modeling, to give an idea of what the flavor of that level is going to be. But sometimes what we see with students who sometimes commit a lot of artwork to their levels is they don't always want to adjust and change things. And a lot of game design is about iteration and changing things and experimenting. So if you've just got like a box with a checkerboard texture on it, you're far more likely to be like, don't need that anymore, it's not serving the gameplay, than you are if you've spent ages like modeling something. And also it's just about time spent, really. Your time is better spent on a design degree doing the design work rather than the artwork. Whereas if you want to do the artwork and you want to develop how things like look and how you get across like a feeling through the visuals, which obviously is totally valid and it's a critical part of games, then the 3D animation in games course is going to be a little more suited to what you're doing.
And not adding to that what you just said, Josh, but please correct me if I'm wrong. When you're doing when we make games, we make usually prototypes of games, and it's never really like fully polished on the course. So if I linked my itch page in the chat if you all want to check it out later, and there are like most of my university projects are on there that I've done. They are prototypes. There are still bugs in them. There's not really like game crashes, but there's just little weird bugs, like say you might fall through a collider or something, or a collider might not be working properly.
You might spontaneously die,
but yeah, on the course you're never pressured into making something perfect, if that makes sense. It's more about showing the skills that you've gained and showing that you understand like the processes of making a game and demonstrating it.
Absolutely. Yeah, the role of the designer is not there to implement it for a final project. It's there to show what direction the game needs to go in. And then, programmers who had done like a computer science course and artists who had done an art course, in terms of development, will be working with you in a studio environment to realize that. But you're the kind of like, you're the central cog in this big machine of what makes the game, right? Like you're driving all of these other things as the designer. Like I keep mentioning, you're like the architect of the whole experience. And then everyone else is kind of like working with you.
And Max has just linked her itch page as well. And also, I just want to say, I believe I watched Max make part of the HDRP testing, I believe, with the cubes. I believe I watched that. Please check that out. It was really, really cool.
Okay, that was I think that was in one of my classes, wasn't it?
Yeah. The HDRP is the high definition render pipeline, right, in Unity?
Correct.
Yeah. It is, yeah. So yeah, one of the other things that we haven't touched on, which I'll just briefly mention, is you do, I don't want to downplay the technical implementation of things, because there is an aspect of the course which is you playing around with technology. There is a module where you will make a VR game. There is on that module, you make like mobile games and stuff as well, because sometimes having the knowledge to make those things drives the gameplay, right? Like what can VR do that you can't explore in other game mediums? So yeah, there is an aspect of that experimentation. But again, like Jonathan said, it's not for that polished end result. It's to poke and play and think about what you could do with it.
Yeah, I made a VR game this year, and overall I was actually quite happy with it, considering it's my first time using the Oculus Quest that we have at uni. And sadly, it's not on my itch page. For some reason, I couldn't actually build it in Unity. I kept getting random spitty errors, and it was saying something like the XR plugin was out of date, and I was like, I am not updating it and risking breaking the entire thing. So sadly that project isn't available, but it was a VR game where you use the Quest's controllers to climb physically around the environment, and that's how you move throughout the environment. And then you would have different objects that you climb onto. So one would be like an orb, the other one would be like parts of fencing and whatnot. But there's a lot of testing involved that comes with that. And I remember when I was making that game that a few months ago now, a lot of the testing came from literally just making a wall in Unity with just some climbable objects, as they're known as, in Unity, just so that I can test the mechanics working. And there is a lot of testing in the course as well. And not just from yourselves, you will have to ask other people as well to test it, because I feel like when you're making, and the lecturers would probably also say this as well, when you're making your own game, you know exactly how it plays out. So it's important to test it with other people who don't know anything about the game, so that they can understand it and get adapted to it. And if they can complete the game or complete parts of it, then you know that you've done a good job with teaching them how to play it through playing it itself, if that makes sense. I think it's called teaching through play in one of your modules, Josh.
Yeah, absolutely. Cool. Any other questions before we wrap up?
While we're waiting for questions, can I quickly say about the GitHub? How it's an amazing place at the uni where you can actually rent out for free Oculus Quests and VR headsets and a whole bunch of stuff.
Yeah, which is critical for it's nice to be able to have access to that stuff so that you can do your testing at your own pace and at home.
They're lifesavers, honestly.
Yeah. Great.
Yeah.
Okay, thanks everyone.
Thanks, guys.
Thanks so much, everyone. You will receive a recording of this in an email after the event. But thank you very much, Josh, Max, and Jonathan.
You are very welcome.
Thanks, everyone. Cheers.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
See ya, bye.